the Jenks City Council. It's Tuesday, August 18th, 2020, 6 o'clock p.m. Call roll, please.
Lynn?
Here.
Murray?
Here.
Isbell?
Here.
Box?
Here.
Dyke?
Here.
Ojai?
Here.
Mayor Lee?
Here. Are there any citizens' comments tonight? Before we get into that, excuse me, we have a pastor here for invocation. Councilor Box, would you introduce that pastor?
Yes, Mayor and members of council, good evening. It's good to see you guys, and I'd like to introduce Pastor Dave Wynn. And Dave comes to us from the Jenks Church, which is right down the street here on Main Street. Dave is married to Amanda. They've been married, 19 years, Pastor?
19 years.
And he's been in ministry for
18 years.
Pastor? That is correct. His wife works at Glenpool Public Schools, teaches English. Is that correct, sir?
It's ELL, English Language Learners. So kids that English isn't their first language.
Fantastic. And he has two daughters, Ella Grace of 13 years and Laney of 12 years, and you still have no gray hair.
Well, that's why you keep it cut short.
Fantastic. Well, we'd appreciate it if you'd open up in prayer.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here tonight. Heavenly Father, we just want to ask you to come and be present in this meeting tonight. We thank you for just the servants' hearts of our city leaders and the time they give and the effort they put into it. God, we just pray that you will give them wisdom so that they can make the best decisions for our city, for our community. We know there's just a lot on their plates right now out of the what traditionally would be ordinary, and so just continue to give them wisdom and foresight for how to deal with all these things, God. And again, bless them, bless their families on the hours given. God, be with our citizens. Help us all to have a measure of grace as we approach issues and deal with things. But tonight, God, we just ask for your peace and your presence and your blessing to be upon this meeting, all those who serve, and upon our city tonight. We pray it all in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. All right, let's move on to citizens' comments. Are there any citizens' comments tonight on any item that's not on our agenda?
No.
All right. Let's move on to our city manager's report. Mr. Shroud?
Mayor, all members of council, as you know, we have a GO bond vote next Tuesday, August 25th. The items on that ballot will be four general road projects, widening Elm, $16 million for that. Funds for construction of Main Street from Date to the Railroad, $1 million for that. And then $2 million for the engineering of improvements to Elwood, and then $1 million for the engineering of extending 106th from Elm into the River District. We have, regarding COVID, we have 34 active cases now in Jenks. We went for a significant amount of time without any deaths, but now we have had 2 deaths, unfortunately, of residents here in Jenks. Luckily, our public safety has not had any staffing impacts recently due to COVID. Staff continues to work with the JAC Planning Committee on grants and potential grants and the location of the center. I think that we're getting closer to finalizing a recommendation for a location, and we'll probably bring that to the City Council within the next month. If not, the first meeting in September. Regarding the current senior setup, they just started having some limited meetings in the community room. One of the things that contractually the city is obligated to provide to the seniors is portions of a meal twice a week, and obviously we've been unable to do that with the seniors not meeting in the community room, but we've tried to find a way to still provide meals to these residents, and we've talked with Party Serve, who is the caterer for the aquarium, and they have said that they're actually providing a couple thousand meals a week to residents of Tulsa, that they could potentially provide good meals at a relatively affordable price they freeze the meals, and then we could provide 2 meals once a week to the seniors. So we're still working out how much potentially that could cost and how many seniors are interested in picking up those meals. But that is something that we've been working on. An item that came up at Councilor Box's town hall from a concerned citizen was IMSA and the number of trucks or ambulances they have out on the street during the day and evening, and their response times. I didn't have any specific information at the time about response times through IMSA, but Chief Oster provided a 12-month breakdown of all the responses within Jenks and how long it took to respond to those calls. And I believe I sent that email to all of you. If you have any questions about that, that's something we can discuss further with Chief Ostrom. But it didn't appear that there were any significant issues with any portion of town from what I saw or what he saw. Regarding construction projects, B Street is well underway. They started at 5th and they're going west from there. I think right now they're about in between 1st and 2nd, laying the sidewalk, so that project is moving along nicely. And you know, as a silver lining with COVID, it is kind of nice that their school is not in session right now, because that would be probably a potential problem as they're working right in front of the high school. South Harvard, improvements in South Harvard from 135th South to 141st started this week. And it made significant progress already. They've ripped up portions of the road and already replaced it with new asphalt. And I believe we'll be doing an overlay, but at times during construction, it'll be down to 1 lane. Today they had the northbound lane closed and they had flaggers on each end letting cars through. The 111th and Elwood intersection continues construction. I think Katie went out there today and took a lot of great pictures. I forwarded those on to you so you can take a look. And if you'd like to go out on site and take a visit, you can let me know and we can meet you out there and meet you out there with the engineers and show you what they're working on. Development-wise, we've had a few meetings now with developers that are interested in a 73-acre tract at 121st, just west of Highway 75. On the south side of the road, or on the north side of the road, and there's interest from big box stores, and so we think that's encouraging that even during COVID, you know, we have potential retail development. At least developers are kind of circling on that property currently. Gateway parking lot, I sent some pictures out last week. Gateway started construction on that parking lot. The council approved just to the south of the Gateway office building. I understand that the Gateway First Bank that council also approved at the corner of Highway 75 and Main Street, we should expect a building permit anytime. The hotel at Gateway, they poured the slab last week, and while that cures, it'll probably take about 2 weeks, and then we should start seeing them going vertical on that. So that's exciting that they picked that back up. Village on Main continues to work on their office building just south of the Tulsa Teachers Credit Union. They're going vertical on that, and it sounds like there's 2 pretty good restaurants, Hatch and Sidecar. There'll be a rooftop bar on the north portion of that building that should have a really neat view. We've had several meetings with Rose Rock Development, who put in an offer on property owned by the Jenks Public Works Authority in Commerce Park at 111th and James. It's a little non-traditional project in that although it's an industrial park, they want to put in residential units there. We think that potentially it might be a good buffer between the industrial and the existing neighborhoods, but we indicated to the developer that they certainly will have to communicate and have meetings with the neighborhoods that border that development, and hopefully, you know, address any concerns those residents might have. And we've set up a series of meetings, hopefully that if council can sit down and talk, or individual council members can sit down and talk with the developer about the project, and you can give them feedback. They have not applied for any planned unit development as of yet, but they had a 120-day feasibility period in the contract that we executed in early June. We've met with Ray Rayleigh today, who has an audio-visual business that he's started this business 23 years ago and has rented space around town, and he would like to purchase the property that the Public Works Authority owns at Main Street and Cedar. It's a very small piece of property. I think it's 12,000 square feet. And I think the offer was $155,000, but his hope is to put up an all brick building that's kind of pushed up close to Main Street to have a showroom and a sales office, and then also have a small garage, put at least 2 of his vans. I expect that at least the contract document would come before council or the Public Works Authority at the first meeting in September, and then any PUD would come probably within sometime in September or October. We've had I don't know how to describe it, but kind of this mobile vendor that is selling just some gear and flags and stuff, and he's kind of shown up at different locations in front of Arby's, in front of the Case office building development. I think he's been in front of Come and Go. And we've had some questions about that and the legality, and obviously he can't be selling merchandise in the city right of way, but we did check and we had the tax commission go out, and he does have a valid sales tax permit, so he is at least remitting sales taxes to the city, so that's good. The aquarium continues to see a decline in attendance year over year. About a 40% decline, and we probably have about a 35% decline in overall revenue. And again, I've said this before, but what we see is, people come through the door, they're actually spending more money per capita this year than last year per person coming through the door. It's just a matter of getting them through the door. That has kind of been the issue, obviously, with COVID. And Kenny and his team instituted a mask requirement for all guests on August 10th. We haven't seen much pushback from that. In fact, some of the complaints we had from customers prior to the mask requirement was that they didn't feel safe because everybody wasn't required to wear a mask. So far, we think that's going well. The aquarium received 4 more of the virtual reality pods that I believe we put those into service at the very end of June. And so for the first quarter of this fiscal year, so basically a month and a half, we brought in a little over $30,000 in revenue from those 4 pods. We had 4 more delivered yesterday, and our staff put them into service, I believe, set it up last night, and they should have been good to go this morning. So Kenny said that he thinks we can do even more revenue because at times we've got a 45-minute wait for people waiting in line to basically, experience this ride. It's $7 per ride that lasts 2 or 3 minutes. So we think that's been a pretty good thing that we've implemented there. Again, our sales tax checks, we had, I believe, our 4th largest sales tax check on record for the month of August. And I think we've had our 4 highest sales tax checks ever in the last 7 months. So one of those was pre-COVID, and 3 of them have been post-COVID, but sales tax continues to look strong. We had a COVID, some sort of reimbursement from the county for our COVID expenses in the amount of $150,000. We received that a couple of weeks ago, and just got news from the state a few weeks ago that they were making available, I think it's $77 per resident per city for reimbursement for COVID expenses. So for us, that's about $1.8 million. So Robert and the finance team have been working on getting all of our COVID expenses together, and that includes payroll for police and fire. And we'll see, hopefully, we can see a reimbursement check here in the next 3 months. And then just miscellaneous items. Councilor Lynn and I met with residents on North 2nd Street on Thursday evening. They've told us that the street needs some help. There's quite a few potholes, and they're hoping for a full reconstruction with curb and gutter. The engineering staff has a estimate for just a mill and overlay and improving the ditches that would cost about $150,000, and we could literally probably go out to bid this week or next week on that, but the residents really wanted to discuss further the water issues, and so we have a follow-up meeting on Friday with the residents and engineering staff here at City Hall to go over the plans. And just so you know, so just the mill and overlay is $150,000. The full reconstruction with curb and gutter would be probably closer to $600,000. And this is kind of where we get into most of the streets north of the Turnpike east of Elm do have bar ditches. And so, you know, I think it's, in our opinion, it's cost prohibitive to go ahead and move forward and try to curb and gutter all of those streets. But we do think that the mill and overlay and improving the ditches is a viable option. And hopefully, when we explain further to the residents how the water will be handled, they'll be happy with the mill and overlay. And then something that I've just noticed, and I think Councilor Murray had mentioned to me, the property just south of First Baptist is being cleaned up. That was owned by Marty Brown, who owns Rainbow Plumbing, and he had been storing quite a bit of equipment on site in the backyard of that house, and they've done quite a bit of work to move that equipment out, and it looks like they're getting closer and closer to being getting all that equipment off. And I don't know if First Baptist has purchased the property and has an intended.
Purchased it, and yesterday, the little shed that was to the east of that house was torn down. So that's been cleaned up now. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It looks a lot better, and I know that that's been kind of an ongoing concern that residents have let us know about related to code enforcement. And so hopefully, thankfully, the church has moved forward, and that site will be cleaned up, and it's not something we'll have to worry about anymore. And you have the general weekly update with police, fire, and planning in your packet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Christopher, and I just wanted to piggyback on something you said about the bond election coming up a week from today. It's a really important election set of projects for our city. We worked really hard to put this package together, and so be sure to tell your friends and family. We've got a Facebook page, facebook.com/GoJinks. There are posts going out, so share those with your with people who follow you on Facebook. There are also signs available. Driscoll's been the sign master out there, and also other members of council. But Driscoll's the keeper of the signs. So if you need signs for your house or for your friend's house or your neighbor's house, or if you want to go out and put some out, be sure and get in touch. And we can certainly use all the help we can get on that.
If I could just interrupt just a second, because I do want to thank Chris for going. We met at 6 o'clock on 2nd Street, and you can just say we had a town hall meeting on the side of the road, because that's what we did. And we listened and talked to those, and Chris took time out of his busy schedule to go and listen to the citizens. And that was very appreciated by the citizens. So I just wanted to give Chris kudos for that, for on the side of the road town hall meeting.
Yeah, that is very much appreciated.
Yeah, there was about 15 people there.
Great. All right. Well, any other questions for Christopher or on any of that? All right. Thank you. We will move on to Councilor Isbell's going to give us some INCOG project updates.
Let me find the mute button here. Okay. We did have an INCOG meeting last Tuesday in downtown. I was present for that meeting. As Mr. Shroud stated, they did give us information on the breakdown of the allocations for all of the cities in Oklahoma, whereas Jenks is $1.8 million capped. If any of you want to look at the county, the region, city information per capita, at the $77 PPE reimbursement per capita, I've got that information and I'll present it if you request it. The first speaker we had at the INCOG meeting was Oklahoma Attorney General Mike Hunter, and he went over the McGirt ruling and how it affected 10 counties in Oklahoma. I do want to say that we are by far more advanced in the cross-deputization than other communities in the area. So kudos. We saw an email where a couple of officers are being cross-deputized right now. We're going through the training to receive the cross-deputization, and we are well on our way to comply with the cooperative agreement. He did state that the McGirt case ended legal agreements that have been in place for 113 years in the state of Oklahoma. And currently there are approximately 1,500 to 2,000 incarcerated individuals in the state who may be affected by this ruling. So we'll have to staff up, beef up with legal and legislative people to address the needs of those people. We did receive our air quality report. We did have one exceedance in the Tulsa area this summer, which is not a bad thing. An exceedance in air quality is a bad thing with regard to our ozone layer. And the fact of the matter is the numbers are averaged over multiple years. So we look to be in good shape to end the ozone season in September. So that went really well. I was just kind of glancing through the agenda. Mayor, can you remember anything else from the meeting that I might have missed here?
It sounds like you covered the high points.
If anybody wants to see the actual agenda, just shout at me and I can forward it to you on email. And if you have any questions whatsoever on any items in that meeting, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, we will move on to our first order of business, consideration and appropriate action relating to requests for approval of the consent agenda. Are there any questions or motions on the consent agenda?
No, sir.
Any
I
motions?
would make the motion to approve the consent agenda. This is Isabel.
I'll second that.
Thank you, let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray, Murray,
Yes, sorry.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. We'll pull item number 2. Move on to item 3, discussion on possible adoption of a new Jenks comprehensive plan, Horizon Jenks to be the city's comprehensive plan from 2020 to 2040. And I'd like to move that we continue this to our next meeting. The Planning Commission approved this last night, and they added at least one item to it that I haven't had a chance to really think about. So I think it might be good to give this a little bit of breathing room for our body and for the public. So that's my motion. If anyone else wants to second it.
I will second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion before we vote on that?
Can you share with us, which area? Where the planning commission, is it the one, what's that one I'm talking about? That David Randolph talked about?
Yeah, Ms. Hilton, do you want to update us on that?
Yes, thank you. The Planning Commission voted to approve recommended adoption of the comprehensive plan. On page 29 of the plan, Commissioner David Randolph had comments previously. When I met privately with council and Planning Commission during our meeting, we brought it up and had a conversation, and then publicly we had a conversation. And Commissioner Randolph voted and made the recommendation, or I should say the motion, to recommend adoption with this language added. And so if you're looking at page 29, there are a series of photos across the top, and the first one underneath it is titled Regional Commercial. The second one is Business Park. The third photo has light industrial and heavy industrial. And at the bottom of that, he requested and included in his motion to add the words at the end. So I'm going to read the entire sentence. The land use plan for the city of Jenks does not provide additional areas for heavy industrial uses, and that was added per his recommendation previously. But last night they added or new uses in existing areas that pose a risk to public safety. And I apologize, I should have sent that out last night, that was the recommendation. But Planning Commission did recommend adoption, I keep saying it backwards. Planning Commission did recommend adoption, adding that sentence or that portion of a sentence. And I will say from the practical perspective, that would be hammered out during the Unified Development Ordinance. I believe House Levine would be able to speak to that as well, that it doesn't really impact this document or the adoption of this document. It is broad enough and vague enough to be included without really putting any restrictions. And at the same time, definitely provides some direction and some focus on how we want to move forward with industrial uses within the city. But the actual application would be during the zoning code update.
Thank you.
So to be clear, the only thing that was added was just that additional language to the end of the heavy industrial definition.
Yes.
Yeah. So they all know that we're talking about 6 or 7 words.
Yes. On page 29.
Marseille,
Yes, sir.
this is Councilor Isbell. There was a discussion about changing the legend on one of the pages. Do we have the most recent legend with the amendment?
You are correct. I had stated in my staff report, it was a little bit tricky because we were having a planning commission meeting and I was trying to write a report for a meeting that hadn't happened yet. And so in the report, I did say that I would make it, I would let everyone know, including the public, if there were any changes, and I apologize. On the 12th, there was a document uploaded to the website, and on the page 30, where you have the future land use map, that was corrected. When you go to the amendment page, and I know I'm skipping around here a little bit, but on page 77, you have, oops, maybe not that one, hang on. On page 75 of the document, it talks about how you would go about amending it, and it makes reference to the fact that if you moved more than 2 spaces on the future land use map, and I just asked them to move business park downtown and business park down, because those were, downtown could only be in one specific area. You couldn't have a downtown land use designation on Peoria or something like that. So it wasn't relevant. So we just rearranged those 2 lines in the legend on page 30. So that was the change that I requested. And I believe that was it.
I guess my question was, do I have in my hand the most recent revision of that legend?
Look on the front page of your document. And if it says August 10th, there was one that was revised on the 12th, and it was revised on page 30, and that legend changed on page 30.
Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
clarification.
Okay, so is there a August 12th that was sent out to us? Because all I've got is the draft from the 10th.
Right, we had already printed them, and so you did receive the draft on the 10th. And it was just the 1 page, and I apologize, I should have made it clear to you all. That was my error.
Okay. All right, are there any more questions before we vote on the motion that's on the table?
Is that motion still on the table, Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question, Mayor Lee.
Okay.
And I know we kind of talked about this earlier, but if that's the only change, do we really need to wait? Or even though I just seconded that, so I'm backpedaling, but, or do you feel that there's gonna be other people who are interested in that change and want a chance to speak about it?
I won't lose any sleep if we don't continue it. I just know from experience that, you know, if there's any doubt about the pace of something, it's good to give it a couple weeks. And, you know, the Planning Commission met and reviewed this in a special meeting last night. So it does feel a little rushed to me, but I'm sure we can handle it if we don't put it off. But that would be my recommendation, to continue it till the next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I would say that I do not know if we can have the consultants available in 2 weeks. They are available tonight, and that is what we scheduled, but they have very busy schedules as well, and I cannot confirm if they're available in 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, could they give us that information one way or the other?
Are you asking for their schedule, or are you asking for a review of the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, well, I'm asking if they are available at our
Yeah,
first meeting.
Jeff and Josh, are you available in 2 weeks on September 1st?
I'm available September 1st.
I would like to agree with the mayor on this. This document is hugely important. And I think that any aspect of it with anybody on this council that needs to review it and ask for time, I really think that we need to allow that. Because once we put our stamp on it, well, you know, that becomes the Bible of the city in future development. So I really think that we really need to think about what Mayor Lee's saying.
I would just add that this is a policy guide. This is not a zoning ordinance, and so it's more like a Dakes review of the Bible.
I think the point is, staff is fine if this is continued. We'd be more than happy to continue this to September 1st. And it sounds like Devin and Josh would be available, so that's certainly fine with staff.
Well, let's vote on that then.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
No.
Dyke. Councilor Dyke. Ogier,
It says it's unmuted. Yes?
Councilor Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. All right. To our friends at Councilman Levine, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for agreeing to be here in a couple weeks. We appreciate it. It's a good looking document for us. We'll get that over with.
Thanks, Mayor. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We will pull item 4, which was related to item 3, and move on to item 5. Request to approve Daisy 20659, a request by Greg Helms for a zone change from RS3 residential single family low density district to OM office medium intensity district to build a parking lot. The general location is 223 North Date. Ms. Hilton.
Would you want me to do it?
No, please.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff. I just wanted to talk to you for a couple of minutes. There are 2 items on this agenda staff report. The first one is approval of the rezoning from RS1 to OM. And as you know, that includes items number 5, 6, and 7, because number 5 would be the rezoning staff report, number 6 is the actual ordinance, and number 7 is the emergency clause. But I'll also talk to you at the same time about item number 8, which is the right-of-way closure. number 9 being the ordinance for that, and number 10 being the emergency clause. So also this evening in-house, we have Mr. Greg Helms, and we also have 4 members of the public that have shown up to speak on this item. So when it comes that time, they are available to speak. This item is part of a master plan. The city hired Mr. Greg Helms to create this plan for a parking lot expansion. And most of you have been here far longer than I have, and you know that when the city is in full swing without COVID-19, there is a need for additional parking. We have the seniors who are still currently using the facility and will do so until their new facility is built. And when they are present and there are other activities going on, there's a real strain for parking. So this request is to rezone the parcel east of City Hall. Currently, that lot is zoned RS3, which is single-family residential, and we are requesting an office medium, which does allow for a parking lot use. We sent out the right-of-way notice. It takes, by state statute, a 30-day notice. That was sent out as well. If you look on page 165 of your packet, it has a zoning map, and you'll be able to see, I have outlined that in black. So the requested right-of-way closures went to TAC, which is the Technical Advisory Committee, and they too are okay with it. ONG and PSO did state that they do need easement access. So as far as public right-of-way and access, that portion is what we're asking for closure. What we are not closing tonight is the utility easement portion. So if utility companies had access underground, etc., they would still have that access. So there are 2 portions, and at the bottom of page 3 of 4 of my staff report, it talks about the Date Street right-of-way closure, gives the physical address, and part of the alley closure.
Hey, Brian, you gotta have access to the whiteboard.
On page 166, it says Mr. Helms was hired to create additional parking for city employees and the public, and the right-of-way will be closed to the public. However, utility easements will remain available. I included a table that shows office districts, and as you can see, OM does allow for off-street parking. At this time, TAC, Planning Commission, and staff do recommend approval of both items. As I said, Mr. Helms is here to speak if you need to ask specific questions, and we have several public. I will bring to your attention on page 167, there is a parking lot expansion phase 1 layout. And in red, it kind of has highlighted the area where the house used to be that has been removed. And that is where you'll see phase 1 built. Thank you, Brandon. On page 168, you'll see highlighted in red the portion of the alley that will be closed, and that is the south side of City Hall, the north side of the police annex building. And if you look on page 169, there is the portion of Date Street that will be closed. And that is between the current City Hall parking and the portion that we are rezoning. The rest of the items, page 170 is the notice that went out. We have the map that NCOG provided. Then on page 172, you'll also see the notice that went out for the right-of-way closures. And that leads us to page 174. I don't have anything else to add at this time. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask, or I can have Mr. Helms come up if you want to ask him any specific questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
My question, Mayor, if we could, and I talked to the police department a couple times about my suggestion, this one came out, about there on Date using that as an entrance and exit, and actually then on A Street using that more as an exit. I don't know if that was anything that was discussed with Mr. Helms, or if it's too early to actually get into more of this discussion, but I see that it's still the same drawing that I brought up before.
And Councilor, I think that we have these layouts just to show what we're talking about with the alleyway and the right-of-way closures, but this actual design isn't necessarily the final design for the parking lot. We're still working on that, so
That's what I want to make sure of, so thank you.
Good question.
So Marseille, the only concern tonight is appropriate zoning, yes or no?
Appropriate zoning and then approval of the right-of-way closure.
Okay, thank you.
But right now, the first item on your agenda would be the approval of the rezoning.
Thank you.
And we've got a few people from the community who have comments on this. Would like to come up one at a time, tell us your name and address and what you'd like to say about it.
I'm sorry.
Right away. It's not
It's-
the zoning, it's on the right of
Our
way.
issue isn't with the zoning,
It's with the right of way.
it's with the right of way.
Okay, well then we will pick it up then. Any questions from council before we vote on this?
No, sir.
Any motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
OJ,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. We will move on to item 6, request to approve ordinance number 1528 relating to JC 20659, rezoning area of land from RS3 to OM. Any motions on that?
So moved.
It's seconded.
Thank you, let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
OJ,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 7, request to approve emergency clause for ordinance number 1528, making it effective immediately upon passage.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
OJ,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 8, request to approve ROW UEC 2076 for a closure of 2 right-of-ways in conjunction with the City Hall parking lot expansion. And the location is 211 North Elm Street. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this, Ms. Hilton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing more to add. Thank you.
Any questions from council before we put it out to the audience? All right, so members of the community, same as before, if you'd like to speak with us on this item, come up to the microphone one at a time, give us your name and address, tell us what's on your mind. Thank you for being here tonight.
My name is Lori McLean. I live 410 West B Street, the log house. I know you guys aren't affected by this like we are. We live there, we deal with the B Street traffic every single school day. Events, school traffic, and closing the right of way is going to even make the traffic worse for us. We use that little cut through to get through to be able to get on the north side of our house where often we park. And if you close that right of way, we will not have an easy access. We'll have to go all the way down, get on Elm Street. It'll make traffic worse for us, and we deal with the traffic every single day anyway. When there's an event, when there's school, in the morning, in the afternoon. And so that'll make it much harder for us. My garage is actually in the back, and so I come through the alley to even get to my garage, and kids from school will be using the alley, taking a shortcut because that traffic lines up there so much that they use that also. So I think it's unwise to close that right away because they use that to disperse traffic, and it's going to back up the traffic even more. The emergency vehicles that I see coming out use that way also. I just think it's a poor idea. The traffic is atrocious as it is. It's going to make it worse for the residents that live right there. That's what I have to say about it. I don't think it's a good idea to close that right away. It's going to make life harder for everybody that uses B Street because it is so backed up. I know it's going to make my life harder. I still have to have access through the back. There'll be traffic coming and going there. And I just think it's a really poor idea. Thank you for letting me speak.
Sure, thank you for that perspective.
I'm Paul Sullivan. I live at 416 West B, right next to where you're going to build a new parking lot. I have a couple of questions, I guess, is a better thing. I'm not sure I understand the closure of the alley. Like Lori was saying, we all use that alley as access to our backyards. I use it. And I'm not sure, also, I'm concerned about what she was concerned about. I see most of the emergency traffic come right out of Date Street whenever they're going down B Street. So I'm not sure I understand the purpose of necessarily closing that. You're gonna build a parking lot, and I heard the parking lot was built for seniors because they didn't wanna be crossing B Street. Well, crossing Date, or is it Date or Cedar, whichever it is not gonna be that big an issue. So I'm not sure I understand the purpose of closing that section of roadway. And I don't understand, I couldn't tell by your drawing exactly what you're doing to the alley. You're closing off the west end of the alley, closing off part of the west end of the alley. I'm not sure I get that. And also, the garbage trucks, that's where they pick up our garbage is through the alley. Everyone that lives face A Street and also us facing B. So I'm not sure what exactly your point is in necessarily closing that right away right there. See, I can't tell by that where we are.
I can show you.
So
This is,
the portion of the alley.
Show me where my house is on that drawing.
this is Date Street and
That's
this is
Date.
B Street.
Okay.
And then
So that
this
new
is
parking
City
lot is up in
Hall.
the right corner.
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
That's where the house used to be that was torn down. And this
Okay.
is the alley that's being closed.
So the parking lot's right next to my house, right west of my house.
Right there.
Right there. So you're not. I'm
This
sorry.
alleyway,
Sorry.
I believe is still open.
So this would still be open, and then there would still be access on Date Street here, but not this direction. Okay, and I agree with them. That direction is we use that
Yes.
a lot. So that's my issue with it all. Thank you.
And Marcy, I'm not sure I caught your answers to that. Would you mind speaking to that again, please?
Yes, sir. What I was explaining, in the exhibit that you see, that is the alleyway between City Hall and the Police Annex building, and that goes all the way, this particular exhibit closes it all the way to the North Date Street right-of-way, and then it is also closed is the street now between the current parking lot and where the house used to be. But their alley going up Date and turning east is still open for access.
Okay, and that's what Mr. Sullivan was asking about, was the
Yes.
alley to the east. Okay.
Yeah,
Correct.
the alley that runs behind our house, the south side of our house. But then Date would be open south of that, not north of that.
Correct.
Correct. So the only portion that's closing is Date Street, north of
Yes.
that alley.
Yeah.
Can you go to the next exhibit? This
Yeah,
one.
That area
So
right there.
that area
Is
there.
here.
So as you can see, this stays open the whole time.
Are they only access to the parking lot off of B Street?
Pardon me?
What was that?
Could you say that
That's
again?
what we have at the moment. That's the design at the moment, but
Okay.
still subject to change.
You gonna say?
All right. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak tonight?
Yeah.
Yes. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Dodie Sullivan. I live at 416 West B Street. I'm married to the other guy. My issue with it is, like Lori said, that's how I come into town. I come down B Street, or I come down A Street and make the right and the right to get to my house right there on B Street, because trying to make a left, I get caught up in school traffic and it takes forever to get home, as it were. And I understand if this is for part of the seniors and helping them get across to the community center, and I understand that it doesn't necessarily work where they are now coming across B Street, because it's B Street, it's the Jenks, it's the school traffic, and it's more dangerous. But I also know that Date is a really quiet street. That section right there, there's hardly ever traffic on it, because it's just mostly us trying to get home. So I don't know if you could just, put up the warning bells and the things there saying to watch for the pedestrians, and it would be still conducive to the people trying to get across to the community center and those of us who are still trying to get home. That's what I got.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name's Aaron Morgan. I live at 404 West B. And I had, it was mentioned a couple of times, but I just wonder if anyone has evaluated the magnitude of this or how you would change doing the traffic the emergency traffic that goes down that street. I mean, the police and fire and everybody, ambulance or first responders from the fire department, use that street a lot to get on B Street. And I don't know how else they would go, and maybe there's an alternate way, but just looking at it, I don't see how they would have a better access to B Street to get to the other end of town quickly than through Date Street. Now, if that's still open there, where they can still access that some way to pass through there, that's different. And it sounds like it's still a little bit fluid as to how it's going to be, but I guess there might be a way to do both things and still retain that easy access for emergency vehicles to get east. Because if they have to go south or down A Street, there's a lot of other confusion down there to deliver emergency help to the east side of town. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Christopher, or if one of the, maybe you can speak to the thinking behind this design and the need for this parking that's in this area where Date Street now is in particular.
Yeah, and so from what I hear, it doesn't sound like, and maybe be corrected if this is an incorrect statement, but the residents don't seem to have an issue with the alley in between City Hall and the police station and building. And you know, that's a dangerous situation with police and fire going east and west through that alley, along with some residents and also City Hall employees. And so the idea was to shut that alley down so you don't have that traffic, that mix of staff, emergency vehicles, and potentially residents. And then that just becomes the police parking lot. And the goal is to funnel the emergency vehicles onto Elm. And you know, getting to B Street, the emergency vehicles, especially fire, they're coming out onto A and taking a right on Elm to get to B anyways. And we spoke with the police department and the fire department, and they endorsed these right-of-way closures. They thought it would be safer for them to be coming out onto A and onto Elm and trying to funnel the emergency traffic onto Elm as opposed to some of these smaller side streets like Date. But I do understand the residents' concern about they use that as cut-through access. Obviously, A Street is still two-way up to Cedar, so they could take A to Cedar and take a left to get to the B Street area where their houses are, or that alley. And the alley that I think a couple of the residents talked about, you know, we're not talking about closing that at this meeting. We're talking about the alley in between the police station and City Hall. And the Date Street, you know, the parking situation, we're trying to find a way for the seniors when they're utilizing the community room. Either the seniors don't have to park at the library, or city staff don't have to park at the library across B, and we can pick up quite a bit of parking by closing the Date right of way. And I guess we thought, you know, having Elm Street still available and Cedar Street still available, those were viable options to get from B to A to B. So that was kind of the reasoning behind the closure. And I think the goal here is to kind of eliminate emergency vehicles, you know, have basically one area where emergency vehicles are exiting and entering, and not intermingling emergency vehicles with the other traffic. So,
thank you. Any thoughts from council on any of that?
Chris, or Mrs. Hilton, just to be clear, the right-of-way closure that we're considering is only the alley that runs east and west between City Hall and the police station. Is that correct? Just the area in red?
There are two portions to be
Okay.
closed.
Where's the other one? Because you just said correct and you said,
The other one is Date from BD to the alley.
okay, so which on this picture has been superimposed okay, there it is. Okay,
So
All right.
page, yeah.
well,
168, 168.
yeah, I can tell you guys from personal experience, and Craig Murray could probably reiterate this. For what I do for a living, it is very unusual for the public to have the ability to drive their vehicles back and forth this close to a police department. It's very unusual. If you go to any police department, I think in Tulsa County, you're never going to get that close. All of their vehicles are inside what I would consider to be a compound. And I know we've talked in the past about putting a gate around the police department. And frankly, in all fairness, police departments need as much protection nowadays from the public as the public needs from the police. So I particularly don't have any concerns at all with the alley between City Hall and the police department being closed off. I've used it before, but I don't think it's necessary for any civilian traffic to be between those two structures. What I would like us to talk about is, just from my initial count, it appears that if we keep Date Street open north of the alley, we're going to lose at least 20 parking spots. So has anybody else done a count to see how many parking spots we would lose, assuming this drawing is accurate? And if we were to lose 20 parking spots, theoretically, does that accomplish anything that we're looking for here as far as getting additional parking? I mean, if our mission can be accomplished with 15 to 20 spots, maybe we can make this sacrifice, but we're losing 20, and I'm not an architect, but
21.
We're losing 21 parking spots if we leave the alleyway open.
The street.
Wait, you mean the Date Street?
The street.
Actually, well, if you just look at that, nobody wants to see us anymore. Can we see pictures? They don't need to see
We're
that.
both on there,
Yeah.
maybe that's part of the confusion, where
Yeah.
the alleyway and the street are both superimposed.
Yeah, but if you just look at the proposed parking lot, and if you look at the area in red, and if you just imagine Date Street continuing through, you're going to lose 21 parking spots. So I guess the question to the city staff is, are we accomplishing anything by leaving the alleyway the way it is? And if we're not, then the question to the architect would be, is there any possibility we get this much bang for our buck with a redesign?
And you're asking about not the alleyway.
The street.
I'm asking about the area in red that's currently on the screen that runs the Date Street portion.
Yeah.
Not the alley between the police and City Hall, but the part that runs north and south of the proposed parking lot.
To me, it sounded like there was some confusion on exactly what was going to be closed, and knowing that there's the section of Date they use to get behind their homes, along with their alleyway behind their homes, being able to use that seemed to solve some of the concerns they had. Is that correct?
Is anyone still confused?
No, she's exactly correct.
Okay.
Being able to use Day Street there. I mean, 21 parking spots, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but 21 parking spots, the library parking lot, and I realize you don't want people crossing B Street as senior citizens, but the library parking lot is invariably empty, 3/4, if not 80% of the time.
Okay.
So how many parking spots are there? We're talking 21 parking spots. So you probably got 21 parking spots in a library parking lot, and you're gonna build, I don't know how many more you're gonna build with the new parking lot, and people can still just cross State Street to get to City Hall. That's, I think, would be
I also understand.
Mayor, I apologize. I didn't mean to take over the floor. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
No, it's you. Next time we'll make sure you come back up. I just wanted to be clear. It's difficult because we're all doing this remotely, and I just want to make sure the mayor knows exactly what we're all talking about. And yeah, okay. So as I mentioned before, maybe the guy with black on my mind can make this rosy.
The only other picture drawing that we have is the map that we sent out that shows public.
Lynn can speak to this as someone who spends, who attends senior functions. Are those 21, how important are those 21 spots?
With the project, are you asking me for an opinion on this, on the 21 spots, the lost of or the added to?
If those 21 spots weren't added, how would that affect the senior center?
I think that we're always gonna have to keep considering the growth that we're expecting with the seniors in the coming 12 to 18 months. Parking is always gonna be a top of the line issue. And that's something that basically every time the steering committee meets, we talk about parking because of the need for it with the community. So if you tell me it's 21 spaces are important, I would have to agree.
And Mayor, if I may, Chris Robinson and I have had discussions about this in the past with some of the seniors. It's not simply about the availability of parking. Frankly, it's kind of about, it's more of a safety issue. I think the seniors, for the most part, would agree that it's not acceptable for most of them to have to cross B Street from the library parking lot. In my opinion, just from having these discussions, I would say that's probably a no-go item as far as most of them would if they were a vote on their part, they would probably say that's a no-go. And the discussions that we've had are simply when the COVID-19 situation is resolved and they are coming back and they're doing potlucks and they're carrying hot food, they are crossing B Street. We have done some work to put a crosswalk in. It's not done to completion, is it, Mr. Robinson? And Chris can answer the question of whether or not it's actually complete. But the idea is that if a senior or anybody really in the parking lot at the library crosses the street, we wanted to make it extremely obvious to anyone traveling on that road that somebody was in the crossway. We talked about having signs that were powered by solar-powered signs that would actually flash when anybody was crossing the street. And I've had seniors tell me that it could take them up to 2 minutes to cross the road, with heavy hands full of food or with bags or whatever that they're carrying into their meetings. So we do have a balance that we have to strike here between the safety of the seniors, and let's be realistic. Worst case scenario, they may be in that building, or they may be in this building for a couple more years. We don't know when the senior center may come to fruition. We don't know when it's going to be completed, and their population is growing. So we do have to kind of keep that in mind. And Chris, if you want to let us know, what is the status of the crosswalk? Is it complete? Is it as safe as it can be? Or what are we expecting to be done there?
The B Street sidewalk project is going to add in the flashing pedestrian signs at that crosswalk.
Okay. Everybody hear that?
Within the next month.
Okay. So that'll be in a month or two?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't this also additional parking that would be really great for when there are meetings, when there's a big turnout, not just seniors, and when there's other events held there in the community center? So I understand the senior aspect of it, but I think we need to look at the whole picture as well. That when we're not in this time, I've been to several other events there where there has been a crowded parking lot, and it would be nice to be able to have all that parking or as much as possible in one space.
I think that what Councilor Boss was talking about safety and crossing the street, if we close Date Street and we use that for the seniors and make it one campus, then you decrease that problem with crossing B Street and the seniors.
Well, it's city staff as well. This parking lot was not designed for the sole purpose of the seniors. It is a city staff issue as well. I don't know what you guys had in mind as far as what percentage of the staff doesn't have available parking or not. But Chris, this never was intended to be a senior parking lot. Is that correct? I mean, its sole intention is not to overflow parking for the seniors. This is a city staff and this is parking for anybody who does business at City Hall. Was that the original intent?
The only reason I referenced, if you would, Councilor Box, the seniors is because I was specifically asked about the senior. I think that closing off Date Street can instead of crossing the street, on the north side on B Street or on the east side on Date Street. It would be one campus where you just walk across the parking lot, if you will.
Yeah, this would certainly be available to everyone and used by everyone.
And if I can make one statement, and I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but wasn't the original parking, the number of parking spaces originally was designed for City Hall before they built out the second floor? And are we not in compliance with our home zoning to have enough parking spots to facilitate the building?
True.
And it's almost required, isn't it? We gotta bring it up to code. Come on, people, set the example.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't want to have to call Malia on the city. Well, I definitely understand where the residents are coming from here, and I know that this will, bring up their accessibility. But I do think this is, just as far as the greater good is concerned, the right way to go. But that's just me. Is there any more discussion from council? Are there any motions?
You can move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Merrily.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We will move on to item 9, request to approve ordinance number 1529 relating to ROW UEC 2076 for a closure of 2 right. Any motions on that?
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Merrily.
Yes. Item 10, request to approve emergency clause for ordinance number 1529, making it effective immediately upon passage.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn, Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Merrily.
Yes. Item 11, request to approve JC 20660 for request by Duncan McBride for a zone change from OL Office Low Intensity District to RS3 Residential Single Family High Intensity District. General locate group.
Oh, wait,
No problem.
just a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, and staff. This is a rezoning request. Mr. McBride brought this to us several weeks ago. He lives in a single-family residence that was owned previously by his father, who operated it as an office and as his residence. Mr. McBride went to get lending, and the bank requested that he get his zoning to line up with the actual use, and that is how we are here tonight. On August 6th, at the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting, Planning Commission did vote to approve with no conditions, and staff and Planning Commission would ask that council approve Mr. McBride's request to rezone from OL to RS3 with no conditions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council on that?
No, sir.
Seems pretty cut and dry. Any motions?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
All right, thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Merrily.
Yes. Item 12, request to approve ordinance number 1530 relating to AZ 20660, rezoning an area of land from OL to RS3.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 13, request to approve emergency clause for ordinance number 1530, making it effective immediately upon passage.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 14, request to approve JZ 20662, a request from Amy Boris for a zone change from AG Agriculture District to RS2 Residential Single Family Medium Density District. General location is 10601 South Elgin Avenue. Ms. Hilton, it's you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, and staff. This item is also a rezoning. Ms. Forrest came to the city probably a couple of months ago now, wanting to build a home on this lot. It previously had a home. The home had been removed. The zoning is ag. We had some long conversations about where the middle of the road was. We've got it all hammered out, and in order to meet all the Vulcan area, Ms. Forrest needs to rezone. We've recommended that she rezone to RS2. So staff and, thank you, staff and planning commission recommended as of August the 6th at the regularly scheduled planning commission meeting to approve her rezoning so that she can build a house. And we did not put any conditions on that, and we asked that council also approve the rezoning request.
Thank you. Any questions from council on that?
Mrs. Hilton, just on a personal note, do you know why the garage structure has been left on the rear of the property, or what the plans were for that?
That was all removed. Do you remember, Chris, about a garage in the rear?
The very old garage.
I feel like it will be coming down if it hasn't already.
I was there an hour ago.
What is there? I do not know. I cannot answer that question.
It doesn't count for the vote. I was just curious if the applicant made it clear as to what was going to happen.
I'm wondering if it was that, if it's her property. You think it is?
No,
The question has been asked if the garage at the back portion of the lot will remain, and I do not have the answer to that question.
no concern. Just a question of interest.
Any other questions? Any motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 15, request to approve ordinance number 1531 relating to JZ 20662, rezoning an area of land from AG to RS2.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 16, request to approve emergency clause for ordinance number 1531, making it effective immediately upon passage.
Again, so moved.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 17, request to approve JC 20663 PUD 30D minor amendment, request by Bell Land Use LLC for approval of a minor amendment to PUD 30C to adjust required parking. General location is Riverwalk Terrace and East 91st Street. Ms. Hilton, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, and staff. This item was heard at the August 6th, 2020 Planning Commission, and I will note that they recommended approval with no conditions. However, they wanted the message conveyed that under normal conditions, they would not have wanted to approve this. And by normal conditions, because of COVID-19, the applicant has requested a phased parking, and I'll get into that in just a minute, but basically, it was asked by Mr. Commissioner David Randolph that he only supported the amendment due to COVID-19 and that in a normal scenario, he wouldn't support changing what was originally agreed upon. He was not in favor of amending it outside of the constraints and the financial difficulties that COVID-19 has caused on many of our organizations, and other commissioners did agree with that statement. So I wanted to make that clear that the request was approved with no conditions, but it was due to the issues that we're facing with COVID-19. With that being said, it was brought to the attention of city staff that Riverwalk Apartments was advertising for traditional multifamily housing. And part of their agreement in PUD Amendment C was that they were going to lease the apartments for corporate educational housing. And because of that part of that amendment also was to have, they weren't going to be required to do full parking. So there was about 120 something stalls that they were not going to have to build. And everybody agreed to that, and all was well, and the corporate housing was going great, and the school was going great that these people were attending, and then COVID happened, and I believe that structure is still in place, but it's in place in a revised capacity, and they are asking to subsidize some of that corporate housing with traditional housing. So I gave you a lot of background information. If you look on page 196, kind of in the middle of the page, it talks about the parking data per PUD 30C, and that is what was approved by City Council on February 15th, 2010. And as you can see, if they were to build the parking per the code and per what was approved in the original PUD agreement, they would need 436 stalls, and they have built to date 316. Mr. Bell is representing the client. He has done the math and believes that it is extremely underparked. They still have a provision for that corporate housing, and there still is a need. It's just changed and shifted. So with all that being said, on page 198, that kind of shows the development area B standards that were approved originally as they were modified in PUD C. Amendment C, and then the actual advertisement that we have seen as a staff. On page 199, this is where I kind of laid out the case. This is market conditions have changed, and the owner developer is looking to subsidize the educational housing with standard apartment leasing. They are asking for a new phased approach to meet the economic demands, and the applicant has provided a viable solution to move forward. PUD D, so this is a minor amendment. There was no public notice, so there has not been any public comment on this. This went to Planning Commission, and now it's before you. The modifications would be as follows. Number one, a request to convert minimum of 15 apartments in 2015 for public use. With doing that, the owner of Riverwalk Crossing would build, Number two, upon leasing the 100th unit. So up to 15 this year, and then they could do additional public leases. At the time and date when the organization known as Riverwalk Apartments leases to the public that 100th unit, that would require them to build the entire 400 something spaces. So in order to get that, and for staff to be for staff to understand and know where they're at in the process, staff has requested that they send a report to the Office of the City Planner and the City Manager on a quarterly basis, showing this is how many apartments are leased, this is how many are public, this is how many are corporate. And that would keep us abreast of where they're at in the process. And all other criteria in PUD B and C will remain unchanged. With that being said, as I already stated, the Planning Commission did vote to approve PUD 30D to allow for up to 100 traditional public units requiring a quarterly leasing report to the Office of the City Planner and City Manager. Clear as mud?
If they ever decide to go all public leasing, will we then at that point require them to add some sort of parking if it's even feasible?
They have already planned in their original PUD for all the parking for the entire facility to be public.
Okay, excellent, but it's just not implemented at this time.
Correct. They did not want to expend the finances on parking when they had a financial arrangement for corporate housing, and most of those, I think only like 2% or 10%, less than 10%, have vehicles, so it was not necessary.
Perfect, thank you for your answer, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I previously had a question from Councilor Oje, and to answer that question, if that happened, the students would not be displaced, and vice versa. The apartment, if I leased an apartment as a non-student, I would not be displaced if everything changed direct and they needed additional if they I got it all backwards. If the student housing requirement increased because COVID's down and now they're having more educational classes and needing more, I would not be displaced.
As a traditional renter.
Yes.
I've got an observation. So it is in their best interest to lease 99 or fewer units. And I don't really see a problem with that because I've driven by there hundreds of times. And it is like a ghost town. There are no vehicles in the facility. Now, the one question I have, a point of conversation with council, is that if they go ahead and hit 100, 101, they're obligated to put in 128 parking spots. The agreement is 20% or 24 spaces to be for compact cars, and 96 spaces to be just under city code standards of 10 by 20. Do we want to have any discussion about hitting that 100th unit and putting in standardized parking? Or are we okay with economy car spots to increase green space? I just want to see if there's any thoughts on that.
Talk about increasing green space, Gary, when you say that, because where the apartments are, help me understand where you're coming from.
They've requested that the parking spots be smaller than standard. And I'm wondering if that is because of the square footage available, or the increase in green space, or vehicles have gotten larger in the last 10 years. And F-150 won't fit in that parking spot. It's too long. Suburbans barely fit in those parking spots. Compact cars, I've got a Toyota Tacoma. I can't park it in one of those compact spots, and I wouldn't because it's a little larger. I was just trying to get a feel for the additional parking, if and when it is necessary, what we can do to accommodate current zoning and not accommodations that were made 10 years ago, or even if we want to run down that rabbit hole.
No, I think that's I appreciate that observation, Gary, because I didn't catch that. Because that's a big observation, along with the fact of dumping more apartments into our community. And we have to be mindful of that, of the number of apartments that are already operational that are vacant within our community. So there are several avenues. I really feel for them in regard to, yes, they've been hit hard with COVID. I'm not against them trying to turn some of this into family units in order to recoup that, but I think we have to look at it as the community as a whole. The other piece I would like to know is if they come back and want to open up more apartments in there, at some point, I think that as a city, we need to find out apartments that we need to have a study. Somebody needs to do a study of need versus want. Otherwise we're going to have a lot of empty apartments around town. And I think you spoke to the way the economy is right now. So I think we have to be careful in what we're saying yes to. Thanks for the parking space. But again, we already have apartments that aren't filled. And we're waiting to see what's going to happen in September.
I would, I just step back and ask the architect in the room. And the national standard is much smaller than even what was approved in PUD 30. Tell me again.
9x18 is the standard.
Okay, 9x18, which is what we would call compact car, is the national standard. So even if we did 80% at 9x19, we're still greater than the national standard, which is required.
Our zoning is 10x20.
That is correct.
Just for clarification.
Yeah.
But couldn't we just simply repaint the lines if that were the case in the future? I mean, if you have compact lining, you could just repaint the parking lot. Don't you think, Gary?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Like I said when I opened, it's in their best interest to stay at 99 or fewer, and because they don't want to have to go out with that financial responsibility to put in the additional parking. So I don't see this coming to fruition, but I just wanted it opened up for discussion as it is affected by our current zoning standards.
Marcia, did you say they were going to open as many as 15 per year, or what was that?
They're looking to do a minimum of 15 this year.
Okay, minimum of 15.
Yes.
So minimum
yeah,
15.
they didn't set a minimum per
maximum
year.
of 99
Yeah.
is probably what. Okay.
Pretty much.
All right.
I would like to see more residents down in that area, because I think that it would be good for the city, it would be good for the economy, good for economic development. If there's more bodies moving with masks on and staying 6 feet apart would be great.
Good for the Riverwalk.
Yeah, very good for those businesses down there.
And for the record, I'm not against opening it up for leasing at all.
Well, they're empty units right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're simply filling empty spaces with bodies that hopefully spend money on the Riverwalk and on Main Street.
Yeah.
And hopefully don't put 2.2 kids into our Jenks classrooms. That's probably the only downside here, is that we have more kids per classroom than ever before. But that's always the way it is when we bring more families to town.
Any other questions or comments on this?
Yes, will Marce and our city manager be reporting us into council quarterly with the information received?
Can you ask that again, please?
If I understood you correctly, you and Chris will be receiving reports.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And you will be reporting in and keeping council
Yes.
informed as to what's happening.
Yes, thank you. I will make that available to council.
Any motions on
I move to approve.
Second.
this? All right, thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Oje,
Yes.
Mary Lee.
Yes. Item 18, request to approve a plan amendment by Alan Betchell to change the limits of no access on 2900 West Main Plat. The general location is the southeast corner of 96th and Franklin. Ms. Hilton, you're the star of the show.
I think this is our last item from me, so we can all celebrate. This is something that we've been working on for a while. There is a potential retail client looking at this lot, and they needed the limits of access changed on the plat. So this is a very fundamental, practical process that we go through. Councilor Isbell is probably very familiar with it from Planning Commission. It's kind of the nuts and bolts of planning, just kind of doing some cleanup. With that being said, on August 6th at the regularly scheduled meeting, Planning Commission did vote to approve the plat amendment with no conditions. I will also state that Commissioner Scott West requested and other planning commissioners agreed that staff, as we move forward through platting and through conversations with developers, that we limit the number of curb cuts so Jenks does not end up like Memorial. And I think we can all agree that that's a good idea. And I will also say that the comprehensive plan, one of their recommendations has to do with traffic, et cetera. And part of that process that we'll go through during the subdivision regulation update and through the zoning code update will be to talk about spacing of curb cuts and how we want to move forward with that. At a safer level, we want to have increased traffic safety, but also getting some spacing and things that don't exist currently. So that being said, this is part of 2900 West Main. It was designed and engineered for maximum vehicular movement. I think staff did a great job. But as you know, development doesn't always move forward as we thought. So in this case, they needed some adjustments. And on page 208 of the overall packet, you can see the general location. And Brandon has up here where staff marked up the report. So originally, when the application was brought to us by Mr. Betcham, we just were going to change the limits of access between lots 1 and 2. And then after looking at it as a staff, having an internal meeting, we asked them to go ahead and do some additional changes because we wanted to make sure that in the future, lots 3 and 4 had full access. We wanted to remove that lot access between 4 and 5 because once you add the one between 3 and 4, 4 and 5 is now too close. And then we also recognize that East 47th Street, the width of it didn't actually match the road width. So again, that was just a little bit of cleanup. They were more than happy to walk us through that process. So staff and Planning Commission recommend approval of the change of access, requiring the approved document to be filed of record with Tulsa County Land Records and tied directly to the plat.
Thank you. Any questions from council on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
How is this going to affect the light that is already there going into Gateway and Sutherlands and things like that? It's already kind of congested.
Are you asking about future traffic patterns?
Well, like, they're not gonna tie their entrance into the current entrance there where it's got the multiple lights. It has like a stop sign and then it has a light to the left of that red.
Right, so I can't.
It's kind of really chopped up there anyways, because of the way that is developed. So is it gonna add another light or a stop sign? What exactly will you put in?
No, that stays the same. And then what you see as Franklin Street, that's the one that curves over.
Yeah.
And will meet up on the north side. Let me look at the plat here. Christopher,
Yeah,
or Chris Robinson's available to spike.
that development at the corner will connect to Franklin Street as well. And Franklin Street still needs to be improved.
Okay. Yeah, because you know what I'm talking about there, right, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, all right. My brother has a gym back there and my husband's there, and when I was discussing this with him, he just wondered how that will affect that area. So, all right, thank you.
Question. Anybody else? Any motions?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
OJ,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. Item 19, staff requests approval of an advance clearance for the 111th Street and Elwood project, JP 25212, change order number 001, total amount of $289,239.44. At final ODOT accounting in the future, our additional cost participation will be paid from the funds that have already been deposited with ODOT. Any additional funds required by the city of Jenks will be invoiced by ODOT after final accounting of the project. Mr. Robinson, good to see you.
Mayor, members of council, the 111th and Elwood project is underway, as everyone knows. During the initial setup of construction, ordering of materials, several items were found that their pay quantities on the plans were not sufficient to actually cover what was designed. So the standard process for ODOT projects is they go back and forth with the resident engineer, in this case EST, ODOT engineer, Seth Buchanan for Division 8, and the contractor on verifying quantities that are needed, and on all overrun quantities, they just add that to the project at the same cost that they initially bid that item.
If it goes over a certain percentage, 125% of the original bid cost, they'll actually work with the contractor to lower the cost per item. And I bring that up because on this one, for several of the stormwater structures that are being placed along 111th, the amount of concrete that was put on the plans for those 3 structures was not sufficient to actually build those structures. And it was more than 125% more than what was put on the plans. So they actually deducted the cost per cubic yard of concrete because they're adding so much for those 3 structures. Those are the structures, and the other item on here that they're overrunning is the steel for those structures. The amount of steel that was anticipated was greatly undercalculated by the design engineers. And so they've had to, during their fabrication, they realized that they're short on the steel. So they've added that to this change order. The other part of this change order deals with several items that were not included in the original pay quantities when the project was bid. And that has to do with just items missed when the plans were reviewed, all the details were put into the plan, and a few pay items were not included with the plans for the contractor to bid on. When that occurs on ODOT projects, they work with the contractor to come up with a unit price for each item. And those are actually confirmed with ODOT prices on other projects. So we know that we're getting a good deal and not the contractor just making up an absurd number. So all these prices have been verified by ODOT as well as the EST engineer. And I've gone back through all the change order notes and discussed this with both of them, that all these quantities were sufficient and actually needed for this project. And as typical for ODOT projects, on Main Street, this occurred several times. When we are given a change order, staff brings a advanced clearance form to council. We're not owing money at this point, but once the project is finished and they do their final auditing, we'll get invoiced with whatever costs that is not already on deposit with ODOT. And this form is just a advance notice that we will be invoiced at some future time for an amount, but we don't have the exact amount until the project's fully done. And ODOT auditing can take several years.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this one from council?
I've got a question. Refresh my memory. When was the original engineering and estimate presented to the city? And what I'm getting at is potential for inflation over multiple years.
Back in December of 2019, the engineer, right as they submitted 100% plans to ODOT, they also submitted an updated cost estimate. And then when the project was bid, in May of 2020, the bid actually came in under the estimate, the engineer's estimate. So when they submitted the 100% plans and the estimate at that point, ODOT invoiced us for our share of the project, and we paid our share based on the engineer's estimate. The Sherwood contract came in under the engineer's estimate, so we still actually have money on deposit with ODOT.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Chris. And I thought it was very nice that Mr. Shroud contacted me about this before it showed up, because he knows how much I love when we have extra money to pay. So he prepared me. But quick question, and I understand where some of the things you just don't know you're going to run into when you're building those. But we do have things, so when it says they were not accounted for, is that they were just missed by the design engineer, or those ones where we had to do extra work that was not known ahead of time? Is that what it means by not accounted for?
But not accounted for, typically that means the design engineers missed it.
Okay, is that our design engineer, or is that the company that we hired? That's BKL's?
Yeah, BKL.
Okay.
BKL.
How can we, in the future, help them to remember everything that needs to be needed when it comes to construction?
Typically during plan review, both the city and as well as ODOT reviews these plans for conformity. And usually we catch most everything. Occasionally there's a couple items that do slip through, and it more has to do with the change in plans over the years. As this project took 8 years to design, there's been some changes, and there are some changes last minute that occurred. So.
Okay, well, I appreciate you answering that. I still think down the road we could find a wonderful way to tighten that to where it's perfect, not really, but you know what I mean, to get it a little bit closer. So thank you, I appreciate it.
To add clarity to her question, is the design engineer hired by ODOT or did the city contract the design engineer?
On this project,
Yes.
it was a joint contract. So ODOT pays 80% for the engineer, we pay 20%.
Okay. In your estimation, is this you said it's more than 120%, despite the fact that we're getting a good cost on the value of the things that we need to purchase, is this what you would consider a severe underestimation of the project? Because I think what Councilor Dyke is getting at, this is the typical Charlie Fox shirt we've come to expect with ODOT projects. Would you agree? On the concrete for the stormwater structures, they did not include the concrete for the wing walls, the head walls, and the floor. Does that surprise you?
Typically, you include that.
Okay. Are those are obvious things to include?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just, is it negligence on the design engineer's part that he didn't include that? I mean, because it is $148,000 on just the concrete.
Chris, you should have invited BKL to this meeting.
I should have.
Well, I think they owe it. I mean, I don't want to table this or anything, but I honestly think they owe an explanation, or we definitely need to make it known that this was not an accurate representation. And I understand the planning stage and everything, but when they forget things, because I don't know what a head wall, an apron, or a wing wall is, but when they know what goes into building this stormwater structure, it's really bad when they forget that major stuff. And then I know we really try to cross our I's and dot our T's. I always do that right. Dot our I's and cross it. That's my problem. I think that's what we're doing wrong. We're dotting the I, the T's. But I think we need to, just down the road, and we need to really put some safeguards in place. I know there's supposed to be safeguards, but I still, because these weren't like our Churchill Park where it had been years where the bid had been done. These were recent. So I think it was a lot of just some oversight, and I'm not blaming anybody on that, but I do think we need to kind of come up with something to where we are able to catch really obvious things like this, especially when it comes to 3 different people looking over that. Does that make sense? That's just a statement.
Yes, and just to clarify, more than 3 people, because when this project is bid, all the contractors look over it, and during bidding, none of the contractors raised questions on these items.
Well, then we just need to get new contractors. I don't know what the deal is. I don't understand how people can do business like that. Here's what the bill is. Oh, by the way, here's another $250,000. So, just something for us to think about in the future. Like I said, I don't know enough about it and how to go about doing that. Or maybe somebody needs to kind of put a bug in ODOT's ear that, hey, some of this stuff's not going right. But from what it sounds like from Councilor Fox, that is not a surprise.
Yes, I will state that I am working on a way to get the engineers' AutoCAD files so that we can cross-reference everything.
Well, that's right. We talked about that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you doing that.
And along that line of questioning, is there is there anything in the contractor world, like in errors and omissions insurance, where we're protected? Because we seem to sign, you know, you guys come up here and lull the council to sleep with your narcotics, which is these thousands of black and white words, and we give you hundreds of thousands of dollars in change order year after year after year. And I'm sitting here thinking, nowhere in the real world does this happen other than in municipal government. So at some point, as a city, if we, and I don't even know if I'm not a lawyer, nor do I know what Mr. Shroud does for a living exactly, or you, but when we sign a contract with a contractor, and yes, I know ODOT is paying the majority of the cost, that says, hey, as a city, we are accepting, our city council has agreed to pay X millions of dollars for this project. But when contractor comes back 13 months later and says, we've underbid it by 50%, well, we signed a contract that we would agree to pay in excess of maybe 10 or 15% in errors and omissions. This happens in real estate contracts all the time, but it doesn't ever seem to happen here. And that's why I used the Charlie Fox route. Once again, here we are. And this is not about you. This is about every couple of months we're sitting here, and she's smiling, and she has a right to be smiling, because we hate constantly improving all this money. But when you say that 3 contractors looked this over and nobody added enough concrete or enough rebar, it makes me kind of wonder, here's another ODOT project, and here's us handing away more money. And this is not,
I know.
You know how this is.
Yeah. To speak on that, typical change orders cover field changes that occur during the field due to conflicts that were unforeseen. There's been a few on this project already as far as finding gas pipelines that were not mapped, that were abandoned, that we've had to move things around.
And that's all within the realm of reasonable, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is this reasonable in your opinion? Or would you can throw us a bone here if you want to. You don't have to say yes or no because of her and I asking these questions. Is this reasonable errors and omissions?
On change order 1?
Correct.
These items fall under more of a oversight by the design engineer.
Okay.
Like we called it, so, okay, well, we need to figure something out to hold those people accountable. Thank you so much for looking into that.
I think Councilor Dyke is volunteering to head up that committee. Errors and omissions committee.
We got $10,000 back.
Oversight.
Does ODOT get hit with these oversights? Or do everything pass off?
Sorry, Chris.
I actually had a long conversation with the construction engineer for ODOT. They have a full system for handling this. It happens enough that they have a manual of how to handle this. So they're kind of used to it. They weren't even fazed by it.
They know how to handle it by having us pay the difference?
No, we typically pay our share of the costs. And typical projects for us run about 80-20, meaning 80% federal funds, 20% city funds.
Right. And so this estimate, this is our 20%?
No, this is the entire amount because we are federally capped with how much funds we have on this project.
Okay. So their manual doesn't help us?
No, but we do have to, since they're managing the project, we do have to follow the way they handle change orders.
Okay. Okay.
Council, triggered a question. I don't know Chris or Christopher, which one, who could answer this, but when he talked about errors and omissions insurance, that's kind of is common practice. My question is, at a city, at a municipality, is that something that we should request of the developer to have the E&O insurance? Or is that something that the city has to give? I don't know how that works.
Well, it's not even the construction company or the city or ODOT, it's the design engineer that missed these things. And so it'd be on the design engineer. I mean, the good news in all of this is we would have had to pay for this whether the design engineer included it in the bid documents, we would have already had this amount of money going to the project. It's just now the project's underway and we're looking back saying, we were gonna do these things, you didn't include it in the bid documents. Now we have to, on the back end, add that amount, but we were gonna pay this amount regardless.
Because we were already over our cap.
Yeah,
Okay, it's just the back end.
and the good news is this came in under budget a few months ago.
And then do we decide not to use those design engineers again, or we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make
Let me
sure.
tell you, we are running out, I mean, and I know Councilman Fox said that, this only happens in municipal government. We are running out of design engineers. Garver did, I don't even know how much I can get into, but, when we have internal discussions about who can we use as an engineer. We had issues with our design engineer on our most recent, the frontage road on, south of the turnpike, massive problems. Talking about that dwarf this. I mean, we're looking at years of litigation related to that project and the design engineer. The design engineer on Main Street, I mean, massive problems. And then this, with a different design engineer. And this frankly is nothing compared to those two projects.
Yeah, well, that's, you know what career to get into next. You need to know what you're doing.
No, I mean, we struggle right now to think about who do we want to use on future projects because of these type of issues. And so it is very frustrating for staff, certainly for the engineering staff. And I understand, we've been hearing about this with whether it's the design engineer, whether it's ODOT processes, for years and years and years. And I think the reason we hear about it for so long is there's just not a simple fix. And we're just kind of a piece, we're a cog in the wheel. If we're only paying 20%, ODOT, this is an ODOT project, they're steering the ship. And, it is difficult for us to exert control because we really don't have.
Yeah, we're happy to get that money in that fund.
Yes.
That is understandable.
And
So is what I'm hearing that we should not look at E&O insurance? Errors and emissions insurance?
most prof-
We have insurance and our contracts require insurance. This is Teresa.
So we didn't have it, you said?
Specifically errors and emissions insurance?
Well, but
They have their equivalent, they have a professional liability policy.
I guess the rationale to go back to them and say, you need to pay for this because you left it out, but we were gonna have to pay for this anyways, so I don't know what our legal basis is to go back to them and say, you should pay for this.
No, yeah, this kind of thing wouldn't fall under that, but.
It's more the stigma of the fact that we get hit with these change orders a lot, and you understand as council members, we get asked by some of our more inquisitive citizens, why are you guys always throwing more money at these projects? They don't know that the fact that maybe it was 20% underbid in the beginning, we approved a project that at 80,000 when all along it should have cost 100. Later on we get a change order for 20. We're back up to the 100 where we already should have been. It's just the idea that we're constantly approving change orders. And the typical citizen thinks that we're a slave to ODOT and that we just take whatever we can get. And in many respects, we know that we're only paying 20% of the overall mistake. So Chris's point is right. We're paying money we would have had to pay anyway. It's just the fact that we're spending this much time talking about it and answering emails from citizens about hundreds of thousands of dollars in overruns is how they like to see it. What they don't know is what you just said, Chris, and that it's probably not an overrun. It was just a mistake in the beginning. But when you're us and you're balancing your checkbook at home, these are disastrous mistakes, unlike at City Hall where we're accustomed to these things and we're used to adapting to them. But most people who ask us these questions think of it the way they do when they're at home. And when they budget for a house, they can't be off by 20%. So that's kind of where the nature of that question and those comments come from.
Well, and the point I hope I can get across here is, we've been extremely frustrated, more frustrated than what I'm even seeing, from what I've seen historically or presently from council related to this whole process. I mean, it's just, we got to deal with it internally, not at a public meeting, and get over our frustration, or trying to deal with our frustrations. But we completely understand, and we share your frustration. I don't want to diminish that, the frustration level here. I mean, I was on the phone with Chris going through this, each and every single one of these, asking, is this normal? Like, why is this so long? I mean, and it is frustrating, and we've received grants for ODOT projects for over $500,000 within the last 5 years that we've actually said we don't want the grant because we don't want to deal with how long it takes ODOT in the whole process. And frankly, the Churchill Park Trail is a good example of, we should have just done the project ourselves instead of accepting the whatever, $100,000, I think it's something like that.
75,000.
Yeah, on that trail project. So, we certainly share your frustration, and, I don't know,
You're good.
I do want to point out for the Elm Street project, we did get plans in and we are in depth reviewing them, so we don't have this happen on our project. So I won't let those plans go to construction until they've been thoroughly vetted.
You guys are learning to prepare us ahead of time for everything, so thank you.
All right, well, good questions, and it is, it is frustrating when it's so often where come back with hat in hand, you gotta pay a little more, but at the same time, it costs what it costs. But I understand the perception of the public. It's kind of like the mechanic you go to, that you go in for an oil change and always has a list of other things that you need to pay for. It's just, that's what it looks like to the public. But I understand that perception of frustration.
Currently, like my house.
Right. 32 PSI. You find this in any area of life, unfortunately. All right.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yeah.
Mayor Lee.
Yes. And it is really nice to see this project underway and progress being made on the right side.
Yes, and I enjoyed the pictures that you sent today,
Yeah,
Mr. Stroud. I guess I could just walk over there, but, since it's here.
you definitely can't drive over there.
Well, I did email a question about that, so we'll find out.
All right, well, are there any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Box,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Ogier,
Yes.
Mayor Lee.
Yes, we are adjourned. Let's do another one real quick. This is the Jenks Public Works Authority. We're calling this meeting to order. It's Tuesday, August 18th, 2020, 8 o'clock p.m. Let's call roll, please.
Lynn,
Here.
Murray,
Here.
Isbell,
Here.
Box,
Here.
Dyke,
Here.
Ogier,
Here.
Chair Lee.
Here. Let's hear it from Mr. Shroud, General Manager's report.
Chair and all members of the authority, I believe, Robert Sauceda, are you still on? I think we have the funds from the revenue bond for the water meter. If we don't, the new water meters. If we don't have them, we should have them in September. We sent out a notice to all customers with August bill. Each of you should have received that states that we are getting new meters, that they will be notified. And we had some good feedback from some citizens asking, what does this mean? Will their water be shut off? And so I think Katie did a good job of trying to address those questions on Facebook and Nextdoor. And so if it does come up, the way that this will work is the contractor will go, you'll be notified that your meter will be replaced. Then they'll come out when they're actually going to do the replacement and look at the meter. And if the meter is spinning, meaning water is being used, they'll go on to the next house and then circle back and wait until that meter is not in use. And then they'll replace the meter. And when they replace the meter, they do have to shut the water off, but it should be for a period of 15 to 30 minutes. And so there'll be advance notice, and we're hoping that, replacing thousands of meters over the course of the next 6 months to 12 months. Hopefully we hired a contractor, hopefully they have this process down, but we're going to be very sensitive to making sure that our residents are notified when this is happening. And the first step was just letting them know the project will be happening and getting any feedback and trying to answer questions. So, but I think this is exciting for us. It'll be a lot more efficient for the water department and public works. And so we think this is a good project. We're excited to move forward, but obviously replacing, 7,000. I think we already have replaced quite a few, or around 1,000 just leading up to this. But there probably will be some challenges, and we're going to do our best to work with the citizens and customers to be as sensitive as we can to their needs. So.
And to verify that, because I know we've talked about this, but those with the newer homes already have electric meters, or the meters that are we switching those meters out for all of the homes, or are they only for the older homes? Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. I don't know if we have required the new radio meters in the ground on new homes, but at the end of this, I don't know the answer to that question. But
we may have answered it before, but okay. Just
everybody
let me know. Let me know if my water's going off. That's all.
Yeah. I don't know, Chris Robinson or Robert Sabasena, or maybe Tanner. Tanner's on the line.
And I think as newer homes are being built, we have within the past 3 years purchased this new technology and these new meters that we've given to the home builders to put in. So some of the fairly newer homes in the Jenks area have the new technology. So those meters will not be replaced.
And they'll be working with the new software we're purchasing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. That's what I thought we had decided, but it's been a while since we talked about that one, so thank you.
And just also to prep the next meeting, as Chris mentioned, the bonds did price at the end, I think this week or next week. So we should be receiving money in hand by the beginning of September. And during the budget process, just prepare you all that there will be a supplemental appropriation at the next meeting to actually appropriate the money for the water meters.
What's going on Apache then? Aquarium Place? They're laying lines, and I thought they were working on the water meters on Aquarium Place right now.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
This is Chris Robinson. That should be the gas company out there. The gas company was laying some lines in the area between 1st and 3rd in Main and Aquarium.
Okay, thanks, Christopher.
All right, very good. Anything else from that report, General Manager?
Nope. If you have any other questions about the projects or anything else, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from council before we move on? We've got Josh Driscoll from the Jenks Chamber of Commerce here to give us his monthly report. Welcome, Mr. Bristol.
Mr. Chairman, members of the authority, it's a pleasure to be here for another coronavirus edition of the Jenks Chamber Report. We've got a few things I want to highlight really quick and we'll open up to questions. If you look at the report that we sent you, you can kind of see some of the active leads. We're presuming about basically two charts, active and inactive. Inactive ones just say no, or ones that are just flat out, you can kind of see in the notes it said, no, we're not expanding, no, we're not coming to Oklahoma, no, we're not coming to Jenks, something like that. And then the active ones kind of tell you the status we're at and kind of explain, the multiple steps that you go through. So you'll have the outreach, you'll have the, the email ping pong for a little while, some phone tag, and then in-person meetings, and then follow-up. So that kind of is tracking along with where we are on that first page you saw there. But skipping ahead, you've got some of the trainings for the people we've reached out to. Just for those of you that I've spoken with this, we had a good conversation with Representative Lonnie Sims last month about Highway 75, and then we had another follow-up meeting with city staff and Department of Transportation about the Highway 75 Main Street intersection. I would say it wasn't that helpful, but Christopher's laughing. But yeah, it wasn't the most helpful conversation, but I think we're going to keep putting pressure on elected officials, and I know the Jenks city staff has been working hard on that and will continue to do so. A note that I want to add that's not in here, but next month, Zach Thomas and we signed up back in December of last year for a Mid-South Economic Development Basic course. It's one of the steps you take in the Economic Development Credentials. Because of COVID-19, it was postponed, rescheduled. We now allegedly are going to meet in Arkansas next month in a socially distanced, masked classroom setting to go to this program. So we're looking forward to that and hoping that that actually gets to take place. They don't want to do it virtually for some reason, but we're hoping to be there and be safe. If we become ill, we will quarantine and rely on the mayor to deliver meals to us.
Got it.
A couple of quick things I want to note on here coming up next week. It's ironic, this is the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote. It's a very great time right now, but next week for our Women in Business event, which we're resuming in person, is a program I've been excited for us to have for a long time. We'll be highlighting women in power at Jenks Superintendent Stacey Butterfield, County Commissioner Karen Keith, and Representative Sheila Dills, and talking about their experience. So I'm really excited for this. I've been told I have to sit in the very back though, but it'll be okay. The speaker should carry back there. I have bat-like hearing. And then next Saturday, August 29th, we have the Jenks America Food Truck Festival coming up. And to add on to Trustee Isabel's earlier signs, yes, we have a great election coming up next Tuesday. If you need yard signs, I can deliver them to your house, or you can come pick one up at the Hive. We've got some there. But with that, I will stop and open it up to any questions you may have. And if I don't know the answer, I will dance around until you think I've answered it.
Thank you. Any questions for Josh? All right. Thanks for all you do, and you've been one of the heavy lifters on the bond campaign. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. That brings us to our first order of business, consideration and appropriate action relating to request for approval of the consent agenda. Any questions or motions on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Bach,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
OJ. Counselor OJ.
She's trying.
Yes.
Chair Lee.
Doesn't
Yeah.
show me on mute.
Yeah.
All right. No problem. We will pull item number 2. And see, I think the other business corresponds to the general manager's report and monthly chamber report, which usually is down there. So if there's no other business, are there any motions to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's vote.
Lynn,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Isbell,
Yes.
Bach,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
OJ.
Yes.
Chair Lee.
Yes.
Yes. All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. everyone, both.
Donna, mine did that too. Thank you, Bob. Donna, mine did it as well, like it showed